So let's dig in. Let's start with diversity and identity. In this section and the activities that follow, we'll talk about what elements of diversity must teachers consider as they work with English language learners. We'll reflect on how the experience of ELLs are different from non-ELLs, and think about how we can recognize and celebrate all aspects of our students' identities in the classroom. When we think about the term English language learner, many people kind of lump all English learners under this one category. However, there are in fact many different labels and distinctions and experiences that fall under this broad category of ELL. And you had the chance to read about some of them in the WIDA Focus on Language and Culture Bulletin. So English language learners may be immigrants. Some may not be immigrants. They may have been born in the United States. Some may be refugees. Some may be long-term ELLs. They may have been labeled as an English language learner for many years and have made slow progress. Some may be newcomers, just starting their experience in the United States. Some may be gifted and talented. Some may have special education needs. Some students may come with limited or interrupted formal education, and they're typically labeled SIFE or SLIFE. Some students may be sojourners. A sojourner refers to a student who comes to the United States with a parent who may be a visiting professor, may be on sabbatical, and their family is typically very well educated. They're in the country for a short period of time, a finite period of time, and they know that they'll eventually be returning to their native country. They tend to come with very strong academic backgrounds. And so all of these different experiences can impact the way that English language learners experience their new culture and how they learn in the classroom. Thinking about your own class, your own students, how have you seen these differences affect students' experiences in your classroom? When we think about our role as teachers, we need to think about the impact that each of our students' experiences has on their daily life in the classroom. Take a moment now to stop the recording and revisit the WIDA Focus on Language and Culture Bulletin. Read about each of the groups below and think about what strengths each group might bring to the classroom and what challenges you as a teacher might face in working with each of these groups. How can you best support them? When you've finished revisiting the bulletin, start the recording again. Now we're going to talk more specifically about culture and language. We'll identify some of the elements of culture, talk about how this plays out in the classroom, and identify ways in which language and culture are connected. If you've studied anthropology, you've probably read one of many definitions of culture, and there are many out there. But generally, anthropologists agree that culture is something that is not innate, but learned. It's shared among a group of people, and it plays a really important role in defining the social boundaries of different groups. There are many facets of culture, but they're all interrelated. Let's take a minute to look at this picture. This is a picture that was drawn by a newcomer student, just arrived in the United States, and his teacher asked him to draw a picture of where he came from, what his home looked like. And this is what he drew. As you look at this picture, what can it tell you about this student? What can it tell you about the culture that he's coming from, his experience? What elements of his culture and his community are represented here? Feel free to pause the recording and take a moment or two to reflect on this. Now that you've had a chance to think about the impact of culture on a student, we're going to think about the various elements of culture and how culture manifests itself in daily life and in the classroom. And as we think about this, we're going to talk about a metaphor of an iceberg. And the iceberg concept of culture tells us that, just like an iceberg, there are elements of culture that are visible above the surface. You see them on a daily basis. Things like clothing that people wear, types of food that they eat. But there is a much larger, more vast, deep culture that exists below the surface. These are things that are unspoken rules or unconscious rules, elements of culture that are not easily seen with the naked eye. These things can be more intense, more emotionally loaded, and deeply held by people. And these are often things that we start to see play out in the classroom as we notice differences between our students and differences between ourselves as teachers and our students. So take a moment now, stop this video, and you're going to go on to the next section of the module, which asks you to explore a website that represents the culture iceberg. And you're going to think about which examples of culture are things that fit above the surface, that are visible, and things that may be part of this deeper culture below the surface.